There's a creature in your home right now that shouldn't exist. It defies every rule of natural selection. It comes in hundreds of different breeds, from 2-kilogram Chihuahuas to 90-kilogram Great Danes, yet they're all the same species. It's exceptionally skilled at reading your facial expressions and responding to your gestures, even better than chimpanzees, our closest primate relatives. And most strangely, when you look into its eyes, your brain releases oxytocin, the same hormone that floods a mother's body when she gazes at her newborn child. This animal is the dog. And the story of how it came to be isn't what you think. We like to say we domesticated dogs. We imagine our ancestors capturing wolf cubs, taming them, breeding them, bending nature to human will. It's a comfortable story, one where humans are firmly in control, shaping the world around us as we've shaped everything else. But here's the thing, dogs chose us first. The ancient meeting. Somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, scientists are still debating the exact timeline. Earth was in the grip of the last ice age. Massive glaciers covered much of the northern hemisphere. Mammoths wandered frozen steppes, and 2 apex predators prowled the same hunting grounds, competing for the same scarce resources. One was us, Homo sapiens. We had fire, stone tools, and language, but we were still struggling to survive in a brutal world. We weren't the masters of the planet yet. We were just another animal trying not to freeze or starve. The other predator was the gray wolf. Faster than us. Stronger than us. With senses we couldn't match. Research suggests wolves can smell prey from great distances and hear sounds far beyond human range. They hunted in coordinated packs, communicating with a sophistication that rivaled our own. By every measure, wolves should have outcompeted us. But something unexpected happened. Instead of fighting to the death for resources, some wolves made a different calculation. They noticed something about these upright apes with their campfires. We were messy. We left scraps of meat behind, bones with marrow, discarded fat and organs. And around our settlements, there was something else. Warmth, light, and a degree of safety from larger predators. Some wolves, the boldest, the least fearful, the most curious, began to linger at the edges of human camps. Not attacking, just watching, waiting, scavenging. And here's where the story becomes interesting. Humans didn't chase them away. Because we noticed something too. These wolves at the periphery, they barked when strangers approached. They cleaned up waste that would attract more dangerous scavengers. And occasionally, when we hunted, these wolves would flush out prey. We couldn't reach or track animals we'd wounded and lost. It wasn't domestication. Not yet. It was something more subtle, more mutual. It was the beginning of a conversation between 2 species that would change both of us forever. The biology of friendship. What happened next took thousands of years, but the changes were profound. And this is where the story gets truly strange, because the wolves that hung around humans began to transform. First, their faces changed. Their snouts shortened. Their skulls became more rounded, almost puppy-like. Even as adults, they retained juvenile features, larger eyes, floppy ears, softer expressions. Scientists call this neoteny, the retention of childlike characteristics into adulthood. And it didn't just make them look friendlier. Research suggests it actually made them friendlier. Here's why. Aggression and fearlessness in mammals are controlled by hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones are produced by the adrenal glands, which develop from the same embryonic cells that give rise to facial structure, pigmentation, and ear cartilage. When you select for tameness, for animals that don't flee or attack, you're actually selecting for animals with less active adrenal systems. and that, in turn, changes their entire physiology. Russian scientist Dmitry Belyaev famously demonstrated this principle starting in 1959 with an experiment on silver foxes. He bred only the tamest foxes together, selecting purely for behavior. Within 6 generations, some foxes were wagging their tails and seeking human attention like dogs. By 8 to 10 generations, physical changes began to appear. First patchy coats and different color patterns, then floppy ears and curled tails. They barked. They sought human affection. They had become, essentially, dog-like. Even though Belyaev never selected for any physical trait, only tameness. However, it's important to note that more recent research has raised questions about aspects of this experiment. Some scientists point out that the original fur farm foxes weren't entirely wild to begin with, having been bred in captivity for decades before Belyaev's work began. There's even photographic evidence of tame, piebald foxes on fur farms before the experiment started. This doesn't invalidate the core findings. Behavioral selection clearly led to physical changes, but it suggests the process may have been more complex than initially thought. What's clear is that something similar happened to wolves over thousands of years. The ones that could tolerate humans, that didn't attack or flee, had a survival advantage. They got consistent food, protection, warmth, and they reproduced more successfully than their wilder cousins. Generation by generation, they transformed. But the changes weren't just physical, they were neurological. Dogs evolved the ability to read human body language in ways that wolves, even hand-raised wolves, typically cannot. When you point at something, a dog looks where you're pointing. A wolf usually looks at your hand. Dogs can interpret human facial expressions, distinguishing between angry and happy faces. They respond to the pitch and tone of our voices. They've developed muscles around their eyes that wolves don't have. Muscles that let them make expressions that look remarkably like human emotions, the famous puppy dog eyes. And most remarkably, dogs developed the ability to trigger a hormonal feedback loop with humans. When you look into your dog's eyes, your brain releases oxytocin. This makes you feel bonded, protective, loving. But here's the evolutionary innovation. Your dog's brain releases oxytocin too. And the more oxytocin you both produce, the more you want to look at each other, creating an ever-strengthening cycle of affection. This is the same neural circuit that bonds mothers to infants. Dogs essentially hacked the human parenting system. They turned us into their caregivers by triggering our deepest biological instincts. No other animal has done this. Not cats, not horses, not any of the dozens of other species we've domesticated. Only dogs, the survival partnership. But dogs didn't just manipulate our emotions. They genuinely made us better at survival. And we made them better too. This was a true partnership, not parasitism. Consider hunting. A human alone can track prey for hours, persistence hunting until an animal collapses from exhaustion. But we're slow starters. We can't match the burst speed of most prey animals. Dogs can. A human-dog hunting team combines endurance and speed in ways neither species could achieve alone. 15,000 years ago, archaeological evidence shows that human settlements with dogs had more successful hunts. They could take down larger prey. Their diets were more diverse. And crucially, dogs could detect prey we couldn't sense, using smell to find animals hidden in deep snow or thick brush. Dogs also served as an early warning system. Wolves are territorial. They bark at intruders. For early humans living in small, vulnerable groups, that warning could mean the difference between life and death. A dog's bark in the night meant a predator approaching, or a rival group of humans, or a stampede. It gave us precious seconds to prepare. And there's evidence that dogs even kept us warm. In cold climates, humans and dogs slept together. Dogs have higher body temperatures than humans, around 38.5 degrees Celsius compared to our 37 degrees. A person sleeping with 2 or 3 dogs would lose far less body heat during frigid nights. In fact, the expression "three-dog night" comes from this practice. It meant a night so cold you needed 3 dogs to survive it. In return, dogs got something equally valuable: a stable food supply. Wild wolves face starvation regularly. They might feast on a mammoth one week and starve for 2 weeks after. But dogs living with humans ate consistently. Not as much as they wanted, perhaps, but enough to survive and reproduce. They also got protection from larger predators and rival wolf packs. And they got something else, something more intangible: companionship, play, affection. Dogs are social animals. Isolation kills them emotionally. We gave them a pack. This wasn't humans dominating nature. It was coevolution. We shaped dogs, yes, but dogs shaped us too. They changed our hunting strategies, our settlement patterns, our social structures. Families with dogs had better survival rates, which meant those families passed down a culture that valued dogs. Over millennia, dogs didn't just live alongside us. They became part of what it meant to be human, the emotional revolution. But all of this, the hunting, the survival advantages, the practical benefits, doesn't fully explain why we love dogs the way we do, why we grieve them like family members, why we call them our best friends, not just useful tools. The answer lies in something more profound: emotional communication. In 2015, Japanese researchers conducted a groundbreaking study that revealed something extraordinary. They brought human-dog pairs into a lab and had them interact for 30 minutes, measuring oxytocin levels before and after. The results were startling. Dogs that gazed longest at their owners showed significant increases in oxytocin. But here's the revelation: their owners' oxytocin levels rose as well. The bond was reciprocal and intensifying. The dogs weren't just responding to human affection, they were actively reinforcing it. Remarkably, when the researchers tried the same experiment with hand-raised wolves and their human caregivers, the effect didn't occur. Wolves don't use mutual gaze this way with humans. It appears that somewhere in the process of domestication, dogs evolved the ability to hijack the human parenting system. But it goes deeper than one study. Multiple research teams have found that dogs seem to understand us in ways that shouldn't be possible across species barriers, though the exact mechanisms are still being studied, and results can vary based on the dog's life experience. The pattern is clear. Dogs have developed specialized abilities for reading humans. When you're sad, your dog likely knows. Studies using brain imaging show that dogs process human emotions in similar brain regions where they process dog emotions. They're not just reacting to obvious cues like crying. Research suggests they can detect subtle changes in your scent, your breathing, your micro-expressions. Dogs can also learn human words, not just commands, but actual vocabulary. The most famous example is Chaser, a border collie who learned to recognize 1,022 different words over 3 years of training. She wasn't just memorizing sounds. She comprehended meaning, could infer the names of new objects, and even understood basic grammar when her trainer combined verbs like nose, paw, and fetch with specific object names. And research suggests dogs may have what scientists call theory of mind, the ability to understand that other beings have thoughts and intentions separate from their own. When your dog brings you a toy, it's not because the dog wants the toy. It's because the dog thinks you might want the toy. This represents sophisticated social cognition that most animals lack entirely. However, this area of research is still debated, with scientists working to understand exactly how dogs perceive human intentions. What we're seeing is something unprecedented in evolution. Two species that have learned to read each other's minds, at least partially. We know what dogs want. Dogs know what we want. And together, we've built a shared language that exists nowhere else in nature. This emotional fluency is why dogs aren't just pets. They're family. They're companions in the truest sense. Beings we share our inner lives with. And unlike human relationships, which are complicated by language and social expectations, the human-dog bond is remarkably straightforward. Unconditional. Pure. Dogs don't judge us. They don't care about our failures or successes. They care that we exist and that we're together. In a world of constant evaluation and comparison, that simplicity is precious. Cultural impact. Across time. Throughout human history, dogs have been more than friends. They've been workers, warriors, symbols, and sometimes gods. Ancient Egyptians revered dogs, mummifying them alongside pharaohs. The god Anubis, guardian of the dead, had the head of a jackal. In ancient Greece, dogs represented loyalty and healing. The god of medicine, Asclepius, was often depicted with a dog. The Romans bred massive war dogs, sending them into battle wearing spiked collars and armor. These dogs weren't just weapons. They were fellow soldiers. In medieval Europe, dogs became specialized. Hunting dogs split into dozens of breeds, each designed for specific prey and terrain. Greyhounds for speed, bloodhounds for scent, terriers for burrowing into fox dens. These weren't natural variations. They were human-designed tools, bred over centuries to perfection. But dogs were also companions to the powerless. Shepherds relied on dogs to protect flocks. Farmers used dogs to guard homesteads and herd livestock. Street dogs scavenged in cities, forming semi-wild packs. Dogs existed at every level of society, from royal palaces to slums. In the Arctic, entire cultures depended on sled dogs. Inuit peoples bred dogs for strength, endurance, and cold tolerance. These dogs made survival possible in one of Earth's harshest environments. Without them, Arctic exploration and trade would have been impossible. When Roald Amundsen reached the South Pole in 1911, he did it with 52 dogs pulling his sleds. They were his engines, his heaters, and in desperate times, his food. Today, dogs have even more roles: guide dogs for the blind, service dogs for veterans with PTSD, detection dogs that sniff out bombs, drugs, cancer, low blood sugar in diabetics, therapy dogs that visit hospitals and nursing homes, providing comfort that no human or medication can, search and rescue dogs that find people buried in rubble or lost in wilderness. But most dogs today aren't working dogs. They're companions. And that's not a demotion. It's a recognition of what dogs have always been best at: being present, loyal, and emotionally available in ways nothing else can match. We've bred dogs for almost every conceivable purpose, but the one thing every dog does, regardless of breed, is offer friendship. That's the core of what dogs are. It's why they exist. The deepest bond. So, who chose whom? The answer is both, and neither. This wasn't a one-sided domestication. It was a mutual decision made over tens of thousands of years by countless individuals, humans and wolves, who saw something valuable in each other and acted on it. Those first wolves that approached human camps took a risk. They could have been killed, but they gambled on curiosity over fear, and it paid off. Those first humans who tolerated wolves took a risk too. They could have been attacked, but they gambled on cooperation over conflict, and that paid off as well. Neither species consciously planned this. Evolution doesn't work that way. But over hundreds of generations, humans and dogs became entangled in each other's survival. We adapted to them. They adapted to us. And somewhere along the way, adaptation became affection. The bond between humans and dogs is older than agriculture, older than writing, older than any civilization. It predates everything we consider modern about being human. When our ancestors first learned to plant seeds or build permanent shelters, dogs were already there, sleeping by the fire, watching the perimeter, waiting for scraps. Scientists are still unraveling the complete story of dog domestication, debating exact timelines, geographic origins, and the precise mechanisms that shaped both species. What we do know for certain is that this partnership fundamentally changed us both. In many ways, dogs know us better than we know ourselves. They've been watching us for millennia, watching what makes us happy, what makes us sad, what makes us feel safe. They've learned to be exactly what we need, and in doing so, they've become irreplaceable. This is the secret story of humanity's oldest friendship. It wasn't conquest or control. It was recognition. Two species, both social, both intelligent, both struggling to survive, looked at each other and saw potential, not as master and servant, but as partners. Dogs chose us because we offered food, warmth, and belonging. We chose dogs because they offered protection, help, and companionship. But what we both discovered was something neither species could have predicted, that two different kinds of minds could meet, communicate, and care for each other. That's not domestication. That's friendship. And thousands of years later, it still is. Every time your dog greets you at the door, tail wagging, eyes bright, it's continuing a conversation that began in the Ice Age. Every time you scratch behind their ears or take them for a walk, you're honoring an ancient pact between species. And every time you look into their eyes and feel that rush of warmth, that sense of being understood, that's evolution too. Not just theirs, but ours. We are who we are, in part, because of dogs. They made us kinder, more social, better at cooperation. They taught us that loyalty transcends bloodlines, that family can be chosen, and that sometimes the most meaningful relationships aren't with our own species. Dogs didn't just fit into human life, they helped create it. And in return, we gave them a place in our homes, our hearts, and our history that no other animal will ever match. This is the story we don't tell enough. That the greatest partnership in history wasn't something humans built alone. It was something we built together, one generation at a time, one shared glance at a time, over tens of thousands of years. Dogs chose us. We chose them. And together, we became something neither could have been apart. If this story touched your heart, there's a special way to share it. The How Dogs Chose Us. Children's Flipbook turns science and history into magic through 35 pages of soft watercolor illustrations. It's a simple, digital way for parents and children to read, learn, and bond together. Anywhere, anytime. You'll find the link in the description and comment below.